Hello and welcome to ECPO's Patient Lounge. My name is Vicki Mooney. I will be your host for the next just about 1 hour and 20 minutes. Now, this week we are actually talking about the dreaded words that are on the lips of every single person I've known. It's in conversation constantly in slimming clubs and gym class and coffee mornings: weight regain. Now, it's something that has touched my life and many people's lives. However, we've always been told that it is our own fault. That people who have obesity, they're generally, they don't have enough willpower, they're not doing enough, they need to try harder on the diet, they need to exercise more, they're probably a failure. This is what goes on through people's minds, when in actual fact, weight regain is a lot more complex than we have been led to believe. Now, I am super, super excited because I have a fabulous panel of guests and experts, patients. I also have 3 tremendous interviews. So I have the patient experience with Andrew Healing from Scotland, and he's a young man from Scotland who's going to share with us what it has been like for himself. We're going to look at the science of weight regain with Professor Lisebeth Van Rossum from the Netherlands, and the detail that she can go into to show us that it is so much more complex than we all actually think. And as we talk about weight regain, let's talk about treatment options with Professor Carel Le Roux from Ireland. Now, as you can see, my guest panel, I'm super, super excited. We've Dr. Arya Sharma, finally, who is residing in Germany at the moment. We have Dr. Sally Walker, who is actually here on the island of Lanzarote with me. And we'll talk about all things hormones and everything else with us. And I'm delighted to say I have colleagues and friends, Teena and Ben Whelan, joining us from Ireland to share their patient experience. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, you can indeed. You can go on to Facebook, go on to Twitter or Instagram, or even on our LinkedIn. Just type in your question, your comments, and put in hashtag ECPO Patient Lounge. Our Fandabidozi comms team will pick it up, and they will ensure that we get it here and we can actually talk about it in our panel. If you want to watch this back, we are recording, so it will be available on our website. And a huge thank you, of course, to our supporters, Yazo and Novo Nordisk. Now, let's get to it. Let's get to the interviews. And to start us off, Andrew Healing is our Director of Communications here in ECPO. He is a gorgeous, handsome young man from Scotland with a passion for family, for cycling, and a laugh that would melt anyone's hearts. Andrew shared with me earlier some of the challenges that he's had. So let's have a listen to what Andrew had to share with us. Hi, Andrew. You are so welcome along, finally, to have you on the Patient Lounge, because you are one of our key players in ECPO. Now, I want to jump straight into weight regain. Both myself and yourself know what it's like to be challenged with this. And for yourself, you're a young man from Scotland and you've been challenged with obesity. And did you have treatment, and how did that go?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me on board at last. It's good to be here. Yes, I struggled with my weight for all of my adult life, and it did come to the stage where I felt that the only option I would have is to go down the route of weight loss surgery as a tool to help and support me on my weight loss journey. Nothing else was working for me, and it was what I thought was going to be a kind of last resort for that to actually happen and to help me with the whole weight loss journey. It worked. It did work for a time, and in total I was able to lose 14 stone over the course of around about 18 months to 2 years. And once I'd lost that amount, that's where the kind of struggles came. That's where the kind of brick wall seemed to have hit, and things slowed down to a stop at that point, which was quite disappointing.
I think for many people, they will resonate with this, whether or not you've had weight loss surgery or pharmacotherapy where you're getting support for your weight, or you've been to a slimming club and you're doing so well, and then suddenly your body is like, no, you're not losing any more weight, and it makes it more challenging for you to lose weight. And I think as a woman, it's very easy for us to talk about this because we speak in hordes about, why am I not losing any more weight? But as a young male, I think that's probably a little bit more difficult when you kind of reach that point. And did you regain, and were you able to have those conversations?
So the brick wall being hit, I would have been happy to kind of stay there because I felt good in my own body at that point. I like to look at the photographs of me from that time. When it started to go the opposite direction is where the concerning factors came in. So because I was so happy with where I was, the people around me, is especially the support that I got from my own GP was there. Now that regain has happened, it's as if it's not only a failure to me, it's a failure to these other people who were there and supported me at the same time. So much so that it puts a barrier in place for me wanting to go back to see these people. So for me to go back to make an appointment with my GP, if that should be necessary, I feel is going to be really challenging because the last time I was at an appointment, I was a lot thinner than what I am just now. And the fact that I have regained that weight, it puts the fear of disappointment on other people's point of view, not only mine, but somebody else feeling disappointed at the kind of same point, which is really challenging, really, really challenging.
So you think that when you actually go back to visit your GP, and I feel this too, that they will look instantly and they won't look at the number on the scale or anything else. They will see you walking through the door and go, oh, wow, you've regained weight. And that's the kind of feeling that you think will be there.
I think so. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a kind of GP who's never put the emphasis on weight at all. She's always been really, really supportive. And I think it's more the feeling of disappointment that she's going to have at the fact that it's not worked and that I have regained as a result of it. It's going to overwhelm the fact that it may be that I go in and she looks and says, oh, you've regained, that's not too good. And in a way, I think that's more challenging. I think if it was just the fact that it was the whole disappointment that I'd put on, and it wasn't aimed at how I would be feeling at the fact that I've put on, it kind of makes it harder.
It does. I can resonate so well, having regained as well after my surgery and 16 years post bariatric Roux-en-Y bariatric surgery. And it's that thing of, have I let people down because so much had gone into helping me with my obesity? But I think now that I know the education, the science behind it, which I know will be explained later on, that helps me feel a bit more comfortable knowing that I'm not the failure here. You know, I have a certain responsibility to my health, which we all do, about, you know, what we eat and how active we are. And I know you're a huge fan of cycling as well. So you are active in that, and you love cooking, and I've seen the healthy, gorgeous meals that you slave over, but that it's not all our fault. But when I think about outside of your GP, I think about family and friends. And has there been conversation? Have you been able to actually have that conversation with them about, you know, kind of where you're at now or how the regain has happened?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been the open and honest conversations around how it started in the first place and where I'm at now. Although those conversations are there, it doesn't relieve the pressure from me. So next year, I'm going to be part of one of my very close friends' wedding. I'm going to be a major part of that wedding. And right now, the fear is I'm going to look out of place. What's going to happen next year in the photos, in the clothing that I'm in? Will I even get clothing that's going to fit me as a result of the size that I am just now? That fear and that apprehension is overweighing any support that I could possibly get from family and friends right now. And that's kind of where I'm at with kind of thoughts and feelings of myself more than anything else.
There is so much emphasis from so many people when it comes to, and I love that you brought weddings in, but when it comes to that kind of visual aspect of weight and weight regain, and I'm getting married in 2 years' time, and I have the same thoughts of, you know, over here in Lanzarote, I'm not going to find a plus size wedding bridal store that will be able to, I'll be able to try a dress on. I'm going to have to travel to find a dress in that. But I think because obesity is so visual, we do put a lot of emphasis on, and society does, on how out of place we look. That instantly people can look and go, oh, look, there's a fat person. Why didn't they make an effort to lose weight? And I think there's so much judgment around it without understanding actually what happens, how our bodies fight against us when we are actually bringing that number on the scale down. But just going back to actually, when you had the treatment and your GP, and did you have follow-up treatment? Or did you, which many patients go down the route of, feeling kind of disappointed, feeling probably embarrassed to go back, and trying to manage yourself?
So after the treatment that I had for weight loss, I was in a lucky position that I was given aftercare. And it's quite funny that you mentioned that point, because the aftercare lasted for 2 years after I'd had the treatment. And it was only after the aftercare came to an end that things started to be challenging, where I hit that wall, where regain started to happen. And I think it was because you were no longer challenged as part of that aftercare to be really focused on it. So the focus then slipped, bad habits started to return. And once they're in place, once you've undone all the good work that's been in there, by having the aftercare and by having that support, it's very, very difficult to get it back. So you're back in a position where you're still losing or maintaining a weight loss.
Yeah, it is really difficult. And I think as this conversation develops throughout this patient lounge, we'll have a lot of conversation around why we need a lifelong management for obesity. Like the one person I would go to all the time, and I think of my grandmother, who has been challenged with her weight all of her life, and has always been fighting that, and is the healthiest of people. She will sit down and eat a bowl of cabbage just because she loves it, and she has always been, pushing and pushing and pushing to try to bring her weight down. And she's in her 80s now, and, in many ways she'd say it's too late for me. But we have generations of people who are like that, who have been on every diet and aren't receiving the care that they need, but the care was obviously working for you. So I think when we look to now, and you've got a wedding coming up next year, and how do you feel about going back to your GP and saying, I need help? Because that's a very difficult thing to say.
It's very difficult to do it through my GP because of the kind of relationship that I've got there. However, I was in a position where I was at a clinic to do with the kind of weight loss, the procedure that I had, and they have now referred me back to the support that's available within my area. Unfortunately, due to COVID times that we're in just now, it's difficult to get in touch with them, and it's a case of waiting on the waiting list until there's a space for a kind of virtual session. Everything seems to be happening virtually just now. I'm not too sure if it's going to be the same support as I would get virtually from face-to-face. I don't think it will be, but I think time will tell to see what's going to happen moving forward with that.
There is, you've hit a nail on the head there. There is that fear around, is virtual care the same as face-to-face care? And I think there's a lot of worry as well around it. But because we've been through COVID, we now have so many people who are in the same boat as yourself and myself that aren't receiving the care that they should be receiving when it comes to their obesity. And I think, as we think of different countries, it's varied across the board how well ahead they are with virtual care and treatment for obesity, and other countries who don't have, as much treatment and as much availability, or there's heavy impact on the services. So you're not on your own there, like there's many of us. But when I think of, just before we wrap up, because I know you're busy, you're in work, you've taken time to give to us. When I think of the general audience of people who are just like you and I, who have been challenged with their weight all their life, and they've had weight regain, and that those words kind of linger around the background, failure and disappointment, what would you say to people like them? What advice would you give them?
The advice that I would give is not to be disheartened by it. It's been proven that it's a possibility that no matter what support you will give, regain will happen. And understanding the science and the reasons behind that will help. That's the kind of only advice that I can give. Understanding that has helped me as well. It's removed some of the guilt, not all of it, but it has removed some of the guilt and the pressure that I faced as a result of the regain that I've had.
Yeah, I think for me, isn't it, as you say, that it's almost like that little voice in the back of your head that's constantly saying, you haven't done well enough. You're a failure because you've regained weight. There's an extra pound up this week. And it's to understand the signs, as you say, which we'll be coming up to actually now as we hit our panel. So understanding the signs, letting go of some of that guilt, and keep doing your best, really, isn't it? It's keep going. Yeah. And keep those communication open as you're doing with your clinic, which I'm praying that you get some results from soon. You get some feedback, you get treatment, and you're on your merry way again, and keep going, Andrew. And thank you so much for giving us your time. We'll head back to our Fan Dabby Dozy panel.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as you could hear there, Andrew, like myself and like many, many people who have had challenges, are frustrated and want to know more about why we regain weight. And I'm delighted that I have such a tremendous panel. I'm proper excited today. So joining me here from Germany is the man, the legend, the game changer, Arya Sharma, Dr. Arya Sharma, who's joining us in Germany. Now, Arya, you were actually in the obesity world. You were a founder of Obesity Canada. You sit on too many boards and have too many hats for me to mention them all. But I'm delighted that you're now in Europe and you can join in and be a part of us on the European stage. So thank you for being here with us. We also have Dr. Sally Walker, who's joining me here from Lanzarote. Sally, you have been in this field of hormones and everything to do with metabolic imbalances for many years now, and you're wildly passionate about science and knowledge and teaming all that up. So I'm excited to hear from you as well. And the one, the only, the legend, Miss Teena Gates. My friend and colleague from across the seas in Ireland. Teena is an Irish media broadcaster, an author, a full-time carer to Google Dog and Dad Terry, and just all-round amazing advocate. You sit on ICPO board and ECPO as well. So you've got many hats going. Now, I want to just bring this back to the patient experience. And Teena, I'm actually going to come to you first and then hear from our experts, because I know you have been down this road like myself. And when I heard Andrew say he lost 14 stone, I was like, that was me. 14 stone is 90 kilos. I did that too. And you've been down that road as well and then regained weight. And did any of that reminisce when you listened to Andrew, and where are you at?
Yes, a lot of that totally and completely hit home for me. And I'm not in a good place, so I'll be genuinely honest about it. I lost pretty famously 10 stone in 1 year in 2010. And I went on to be extremely active, as in going to base camp Mount Everest and going beyond that to a technical climb on Island Peak. I formed an absolute love of mountains and went on to climbed several more large ones, Elbrus in Russia and Kilimanjaro, climbed in the Alps. I took up whitewater canoeing and kayaked along a stretch of the Nile, went across Uganda on a bike and climbed some mountains in Uganda, jumped into the Nile. I took up long distance swimming, and I kept my weight off for about, I'd say, 5 or 6 years. But I started to regain weight after about 5 years, and at that point I was into triathlons. So I actually did 10 triathlons in 1 year as I regained 3 stone, and it crushed me. It absolutely crushed me. Prior to that, when I had been maintaining, I wasn't really maintaining. I was struggling to diet off what I thought was something that needed to be dieted away, and that was loose skin. And I didn't realize that that was something that I wasn't really ever going to achieve. And I had a green ball gown in the back of my wardrobe, which I had designated for a particular St. Patrick's Day, and it's still hanging there because it was a size too small for me, and I was determined because I'd been losing weight so quickly, and I'd lost, as I say, 10 stone in 1 year, and I was sure that this dress was, the next stage for me. And for the next 5 years, I looked at the back of the wardrobe, and despite all of the activity that I was doing, I never came close. In fact, when I went to Everest Base Camp, I was with a group of 14 people, and they all lost between a stone and 3 stone, although he was very ill. And I gained a pound. Now, it wasn't part of my regain, but it just goes to show the difference between my body and other people's bodies. We were all doing the same amount of work. We were eating what we were being fed by the Sherpa who were with us. So we were on a similar diet, similar amount of exercise, and they were losing stones at altitude, and I was actually gaining a pound. Now my body shape changed, and I was very muscular, and I looked amazing, and I felt incredible. But yeah, I had an extra pound going home to Ireland. So anyhow, speed up. 5 years later, the inexorable weight gain begins, and I felt as if I was running in slow motion because I kept listening to the message of eat less and do more, and I kept eating less and doing more and getting heavier, and it ground me down. It absolutely ground me down. And looking back now, um, I wish I'd taken a chill pill, and I don't mean chemically, but I wish I had been more relaxed about what was going on, because I made myself deeply unhappy. And I lost the joy that I had in being strong and in being powerful. And I just couldn't understand what I was doing wrong. And I blamed myself. And I'm still blaming myself because I don't know the answers. And it's deeply, deeply frustrating to me that I went from being 23 stone and eventually coming down to 10 and a half, and then going up to 12, which was, I actually loved being 12 stone. I felt really strong and really powerful, and that's where I maintained for about 5 years. But I've gone from being 12 stone right back up to being 25 stone again. My hips are sore because I've got arthritis, and the weight is pressing down on me. I have physical mobility issues. The only thing that I can still do is swimming. And one by one, I didn't just give up my exercise. One by one, my body just refused to do the things that I wanted it to do. I literally kept cycling until I fell off my bike because I couldn't balance anymore with my belly in the way under the handlebars. And I kept kayaking until I have 2 kayaks, and I kept kayaking until both of them sank underneath me. So I didn't give up on exercise, but something gave up on me. And I think it's extraordinary to actually point out that in all these years, because I have battled with my weight since I was 14, or maybe even 13, and I realized that my classmates' jeans didn't fit me. And that was the first time I started feeling abnormal, and I felt abnormal my entire life, despite being an outward going person that's in the media spotlight. I've always felt like an outsider. But I am now 55 or 56. I'm born in 1965, so you'll have to work it out. But but I'm in my mid 50s, and I've had this problem my entire life, and I have only recently been put in touch with an endocrinologist, a psychotherapist, and a dietitian. My GP has been looking at me for years and has never treated me for obesity. Has frequently told me that I needed to lose weight. I have frequently in a medical environment been made to feel guilty about my weight, and been made to feel that I'm creating a scenario where I'm going to get diabetes and heart failure and cancer and all the other comorbidities that are out there. They're stacked up and lined up on me frequently for me to have a look at. But I've never, ever actually been treated up until recently. And as I say, this is the first time I've had bloods taken. So I'm waiting to see the result of my blood tests. And maybe, hopefully, there's another story to tell. I mean, talking about stories, I was so proud of my weight loss. I wrote a book about it.
You did.
And when we're talking about being embarrassed about, how mortified did I feel after having a book on the shelf, one foot in front of the other, my inner me, and so on. And here
Your
I
book
am
is
at
on my
25 stone. Oh,
book is on my shelf
oh,
and it's signed by you. And you know what? It's your experience, and it's your experience that makes you such a tremendous inspiration still to so many people. And do you know, Teena, I want to bring your story to actually Arya and Sally now. And Arya, you have, I am sure, heard many experiences over the years. And can I ask you, does this resonate from what you hear from patients?
Well, absolutely. I think, both Tina's story and Andrew's story is a story that I've heard over and over again. And in some ways, it's almost like these are the stories I'm expecting to hear. When somebody tells me, they've lost, uh, in fact, if Tina would have told me, she lost 12 stone and has been keeping it off for the last 20 years, frankly, I would have been surprised. And in fact, I would have said, well, I'm not quite sure I believe that. Because for anybody who's working in the obesity, area, uh, the fact that people who start out with excess weight and then manage to lose it, that is going to continue to being a lifelong struggle is just the nature of this chronic disease, and I know that a lot of people, don't like hearing the word disease and certainly don't like hearing the word chronic disease. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a problem which once you get, you are pretty much stuck with for the rest of your life. Well, then a lot of people say, well, then you shouldn't get it in the first place. But even that's not so easy because, we've heard, Tina's story. She's been struggling with this ever since she was a young girl. And that's not typical because a lot of people, and in fact, like I often say, we talk a lot about obesity prevention, but I've seen obesity happen to some people who have done everything right for prevention. These are former athletes. I've had former Olympic athletes, sitting in my office with obesity. So, all that healthy working out and healthy diets and personal training that they've done for years and years and years certainly didn't prevent their obesity because, they wouldn't be sitting in front of me. Had that prevention worked. So there's also this prevention myth that if you do everything right, then you have no business getting obesity, and that is simply not true.
That is so nail on the head. I love what you brought into that because I can see Sally is smiling away. And I know Arya and Sally, you guys haven't met before, right? And we work with so many fabulous clinicians across the world, really. So I'm delighted to have you here, Sally, because I know some of what Teena said and what Arya said there really resonated. And what was your kind of take on Teena's experience and kind of patients that you have seen as well?
Very interesting. My daily work is not with obesity per se, but more so with hormonal disturbances, metabolic disturbances. And I thought actually what Arya was saying was very interesting because my metabolic understanding is that the extremes are what create the imbalances. And I see the triathletes, I see a lot of those from my workplace. But I see this extremeness that they do, their diets, the amount of exercise they're doing. And I was thinking of you, Teena, as well, where you were doing all your sports, that you're changing your metabolism. And it's, for me, I think it's a little bit the same as going on crash diets. You change the metabolism. And then when you stop doing, you want the body to go back to the metabolism it had before. But for some reason, and I think this is the what science needs to answer for us, how do we get back? And how long time will it take? And science seems to be suggesting that it may take forever, or we may not get back to that reset point. So, but that's what I find very interesting, that the extremes of things are the things that put the metabolism out, and then we get this problem with storing fat, because that's what the body does. It's what it likes to do. It's just store fat. It seems to be the solution it has.
Do you know, we're actually, in a moment, we're going to go into the interview actually with Professor Lisebeth. Lisebeth is just an absolute legend and a dream to interview. But Arya, I know you would actually want to respond there to what Sally has said. because you've both seen this in many circumstances. So just before we jump to the interview, do you want to share a minute or two on that?
Well, I think the way I often talk when I explain this to my patients, I say, most bodies like to gain weight, but they don't like to lose it. That's just how biology works. And there is a very complex biology that protects you from weight loss. And this biology is basically what you're up against, once you've gained the weight. And unfortunately, there does not seem to be any way back from once you put the weight on. That then becomes the weight that your body wants you to have. And, and I'm sure, Carel in this interview is going to talk about the neuroscience here, and maybe Lisebeth is going to talk about it. But the bottom line here is that your body, all of our bodies, they defend us against body weight, against losing body weight. They defend our body weights because body weight is, which is basically energy stores. That's what we're talking here about. Those are absolutely important for survival. We all wouldn't be here if our bodies were not not able to store calories and defend those calories and make sure that those calories do not get used unless you absolutely have to. And if you absolutely have to use those calories, then you use those calories. But then your body is totally get to replenishing those calories as soon as possible, and has a lot of very complex, mechanisms, A, to defend your calories, and secondly, to make sure those stores get back full as soon as possible. Once they get depleted for whatever reason. And so the problem, that you're up against here is not just, people are actively trying to lose weight. We see this in people who come through illnesses. We see this in people, in fact, some of the best data we have on how the body does this comes from starvation experiments. There are the famous experiments or trials, if you want, that were done by Ansel Keys, where they took, folks, and they actually, and these were volunteers who agreed to lose weight by not eating anything for over 3 months. And they lost a tremendous amount of weight. And that was an experiment. And the weight obviously came back. And then, and that helped us understand how the body actually does this. And it's fascinating. But, as fascinating as the science is, the problem you're left with is that your body is going to want that weight back. And that's why I've used the analogy, and Vicki, this, I often talk about the rubber band that you have to pull on. And your weight wants to be up here and you want to be down here somewhere, so you have to pull the rubber band to get there. But once you get there, you're going to have to keep pulling, and your body is fighting you, actively fighting. It does not want to lose that weight, which means that as the more you pull on the rubber band, it does not get easier, it gets harder, which means you hit that plateau. At some point, your body's going to say enough is enough. And so no matter how hard you pull, you're not going to get beyond that point. Like nobody loses weight till they disappear, right? At some point, you're going to hit that plateau. That's your body resisting further weight loss. Your body saying enough is enough. And it's a rubber band, which means that the minute you start doing even a little bit less pull on that rubber band, it's going to start going back all the way. It's going to snap right back to where you started. And unfortunately, because it's a rubber band, sometimes it snaps even beyond where you started, which means, sometimes I joke about it. I know it's not very funny, but when I say, what's the easiest way to gain 25 pounds? Lose 20. And it's going to set you up for that weight regain. So that's the problem you're up against. And medicine hasn't yet found a cure. I don't know that they'll find a cure, but we certainly have treatments. And I guess we're going to talk about some of those treatments, in the course of this talk.
You really beautifully led us into Lisebeth's interview. So I'm going to jump straight to it and introduce Lisebeth. Now, Lisebeth is Professor Lisebeth Van Rossum. Now, I could give you every hat that this beautiful lady wears as an internist, endocrinologist, professor of obesity and stress hormones at the University Medical Center in Rotterdam, European clinical lead in the European Society for Endocrinology as well. This lady has a role in the Dutch Ministry of Health. In 2020, she was actually selected as LinkedIn's top voice and top 10 most influencing women in the Netherlands. She's an international bestseller of Fat, the Secret Organ, the amazing book, which I downloaded on Audible and just blew my mind. Let us see what Lisebeth had to say. When I met with her at, I think it was probably 7:30 this morning. Well, hello, Lisebeth. It is so exciting to have you here. You're very, very welcome along to the Patient Lounge. Now, let's just jump straight into it. talk to us about what is going on with obesity and weight regain.
Well, actually, obesity, it's actually a rather complex story, to be honest. We always think about fat like it's just an innocent layer of isolation, and when you have too much, you get all these diseases. But the story is much more complex because basically fat mass is an organ and it's producing hundreds of hormones, and it's important for immune function. And if you just have too much, this fat becomes sick, and it disturbs the whole hormonal communication between the body and the brain. And also the causes of obesity are really complex. We always think, of course, it's unhealthy lifestyle as a main cause, and well, that's an important cause. But there's much more than that. There are many categories which can contribute to weight gain at the first place. Next to unhealthy lifestyle, also things like lack of sleep or stress, which is inducing more hunger, but also sometimes medication plays a role. We found in a study in our patients living with obesity that half of the patients was taking at least one or more medication with a potential weight-gaining side effect. Sometimes mental disorders are playing a role, like binge eating disorder or other or depression. We sometimes see also that hormonal changes play a role. Some very common hormonal changes like the menopause or after pregnancy, that the kilos are difficult to lose in some persons, but also sometimes more other causes like disease like thyroid hormone disease, or the testosterone levels is low in man, or even more rare diseases. And also other rare causes, which are often missed, but for example, hypothalamic causes, which is a regulatory center in the brain, which can be damaged by, for example, a serious head injury, and that increases your hunger, your feelings of hunger. And sometimes also a monogenetic cause can play a role, which, and in this case, then people are very hungry from early age on, and they develop obesity from early on, so since childhood. And very often they are then the only one in their family, or just one father or one mother is also living with obesity, but all the others are slim. So those are alarm symptoms for genetic obesity. But taken together, the most common cause is, of course, that there is a combination of, for example, unhealthy lifestyle, because our environment is very obesogenic, which is very clear, I think, in these times. But when you're developing obesity, then sometimes you need medication, like some medication for diabetes or for hypertension or high blood pressure, and or depression, and some of this medication can also inhibit weight loss, for example. So the story is often very complex. What is making you gain weight at the first place? Yeah. So that's a major point, I think.
Do you know, everything that you said there, I wish, and I know we're going to see it on screen shortly, but everything you said there just makes me realize I grew up thinking that obesity was purely what was on the plate, that I was eating too much of it, and that I wasn't exercising enough, even though I was doing as much as my friends and my other family members, but they were challenged. And I think of people who are going to slimming clubs all of their life. I think of my grandmother, who always says, I've been on a diet all of my life. But the scale is going back and forth and back and forth. And, you know, after doing fantastic weeks in the gym and diary, everything, your food is down, and then suddenly you're saying, how have I gained a kilo? What on earth has happened? It's not that simple, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's another point. No matter what reason is you get obese, it's really complex to lose weight. We think it's very simple. Just eat less, move more, and the problem is being solved. Well, first of all, it can depend on the cause, but also, no matter cause, the body becomes sort of reprogrammed when you're obese and tries always to get up again to the higher weight. And maybe it's good to explain that in the body itself, we have sort of a weight scale. And the fat mass is producing a very important hormone, the fat hormone leptin. And that's basically saying how much fat do you have in the body, and it regulates also our amount of fat because it's received in the brain, in the hypothalamus, this regulatory area, which is really important for your feelings of hunger, but also for metabolism. And the leptin is actually inhibiting food intake, it's decreasing your feelings of hunger, and it's increasing metabolism. That's a perfect system, which if it functions normally, that's good because then you're sort of weight stable. But I think it's the importance of this hormone is also illustrated by, for example, one of our patients who had a lack of the receiver of this leptin in the brain. So she's basically not having the signal. And she got obese from really early age on, and very much, she was extremely hungry, and she was the only one in her family. So you see that this hormone, one hormone can be really important. Well, that's actually rare, relatively rare. But if you look at the normal situation, when people gain weight and they have obesity, then also this in a light version can happen. Actually, the leptin signal at the brain level is not being received anymore because the receptor in the brain is getting resistant. It's not so sensitive anymore for the signal. And then the result is that this whole inhibition of food and increasing of metabolism, this beautiful regulatory system is being disturbed. And this is one of the mechanisms which makes the body always to go up again. So you can imagine if there are two people are weighing 80 kilograms, for example, but one person had been living in obesity before and was weighing 130 and lost weight, whether it's diet or pharmacotherapy or bariatric surgery. But especially when a person loses weight with lifestyle, then this person, this ex-130er, is always has so much more effort to do lifelong to be the 80 kilograms. Well, this person thinks, well, it's simple. You just live your life, and once in a while you can get an ice cream. It's not so difficult to get stable, but not realizing this other person hasn't disturbed system and get reprogrammed. So you can lose weight, but it's really difficult. And for the environment and for yourself, it's good to realize that not to blame yourself, and also the environment and the people around you should not blame a person living with obesity for a lack of willpower. It's actually basically the body which is also responding to our environment. And talking about environment, that's a really important factor right now, because no matter what your weight is, our environment with the supermarkets, with full of processed and unhealthy food, is of course contributing to the whole pandemic of obesity. And also the lack of exercise in general for a lot of people, also people with normal weight actually. So healthy lifestyle is good for everybody, but it's often not the only cause that people really get obese. And I think what's an important thing, if we worldwide would like to tackle the whole problem of obesity and the epidemic to stop it, we should do two things. I think the situation is now like this. There's a water tap wide open with water, because every day new people are developing overweight or obesity. So that's the environment. We really need to close the tap, and that means probably price adjustments, that healthy food is more likely that you buy healthy foods, and to stimulate people to exercise more, to make it feasible also for people. So healthy supermarket all around, healthy food at schools, all those things, that's closing the tap. But then the situation is right now that the bath is still full, and a bath, we should actively empty the bath. We should unplug it, because when you close the tap, the bath's still full and it's not automatically emptying. And the full bath, what I mean is people who already are living with obesity. We need to help there, and it can be with really intensive combined lifestyle intervention, also focusing on the brain, on behavior, on automatic behavior, because a lot of our food intake is unconscious. We make more than 200 food choices a day, and the majority is unconscious. So we have to stay on that point. But sometimes people will need additional treatments like anti-obesity medication or bariatric surgery to control the disease of obesity, because the body always wants to go back up in weight. So we need to close the tap and to unplug, to empty the bath, and then we can be effective. And I think the most important thing is we should not stigmatize people living with obesity, because it's so hard to lose weight. It is possible, but it's really hard.
Yeah, and I love what you've said, because it brings me to Andrew's point in his interview where he said he felt like a failure. He disappointed people. He disappointed himself when he regained weight. And as you speak about obesity, and we know it can be genetic, we know it can be environmental, socioeconomic, psychological, but also when I think about it, I think of the neurological factors that just aren't discussed as you've explained them brilliantly. And so for people like that, we need to tell people to stop actually beating themselves up. And one thing I always say is so many people are living with obesity and they're going to the gym, they are out cycling, they're walking in groups, they're making the healthy food choices. And people say, you've no willpower. But they are constantly trying. And if that isn't willpower, I don't know what is. But I didn't even want to interrupt you, because I just love everything that you've said. And I know you have to get back. You're busy. Your phone is probably buzzing away in the background there. But I just want to give you the last couple of minutes to share anything else, because I could listen to you for an hour.
Well, I think an important thing is what you're mentioning. I think there's a lot of lack of knowledge here, and also in healthcare professionals, we know that there is not much education about obesity. Well, I think there are many new insights. There are new in science, and scientists all over the world talk about it. But and some scientists are also doctors like me, and we're telling our patients in our offices. But I think there are many healthcare professionals who didn't have this knowledge during their medical education. So I think one task we have to do is also to educate more at medical schools. What are exactly the causes? What are the proper treatments? And we will hear a lot more about the treatments in this session as well. But gaining knowledge is really important, not only for healthcare professionals, but also for the general audience. So therefore, I'm really grateful that we can talk about this tonight.
Yeah, and I'm so delighted that you actually brought that up, because I think as a patient, when I go to my GP, I think that he has all the answers. He's been through medical school, he knows everything, but it's almost as if our healthcare professionals haven't had the opportunity to actually explore obesity and the complexity of it from professionals like yourself that know it inside out. And I'm so grateful for you taking the time. I know our audience will be on Twitter and on social media chatting about this, and I'm excited to get back to our panelists as well, because I've no doubt that Arya and Dr. Sally there are just edging to actually build on what you've said. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll jump back to our panel.
Thank you very much.
And you're very welcome back. Now, I have to say, I just loved speaking to that lady this morning. As you can tell, it was 6:30 in the morning, hence I looked absolutely exhausted. But I want to bring back our panel, and joining us on the panel is Mr. Ben Whelan from Ireland, who is an ECPO Board of Directors member and a passionate advocate, a man with a love for walking. Ben, you're very, very welcome to join our panel. Now, I want to come to yourself first, because I remember this story of yourself explaining how your love of walking, you had walked millions of steps in the 1 year and still managed to regain weight, which was very frustrating. How has your experience been?
I wouldn't describe it as a love of walking, more a necessity. I have always had struggled with my weight. I worked like a long time on it, didn't get anywhere. Eventually had bariatric surgery in 2016 and lost a lot of weight. Now, I did have bariatric sleeves, so it was explained that, it's not a definite solution for the rest of your life. There's always the option that we can go back and revise it into a bypass if we have to. But I don't think it was quite explained how difficult it would be to retain it. Anyway, I was in the gym. I lost a lot of weight. Then last year the gym's closed, and that's when I started walking seriously, if you like. So yeah, on my Fitbit in January, I was told that I walked 6 million steps last year, along with the gym time. And yeah, I put on 6 kilos. So I remember, as I said, I think it was in 2018, I was in the convention centre in Dublin, and Arya was on the stage with this elastic band, and I said, eureka moment here. This is the struggle, and you must do more and more in order to maintain the weight. And that is literally what it has been.
Do you know, this is the conversation that everybody's having. I'm looking at a comment here on Facebook from Claire. Claire, thank you for joining us. And she said, why don't our GPs know about this? Why don't they understand? Why are they still judging us? I'm learning so much, and I love Lisebeth's presentation, but I'd love to hear more. Why don't our healthcare professionals understand? Arya, you have been involved in this for donkey's years. You've been around the block and teaching. Come on, tell us what's going on.
Well, let me start with the good news. The good news is that a lot of, virtually anybody practicing medicine today has an interest in obesity, because like everybody, it's something that they see every day. That's something that is of concern. Very often, actually, I find that, some of the interest that healthcare professionals have in obesity is a personal interest, because, of course, there was a lot of healthcare professionals who struggle with their own weight and who have their own issues. So the good news is this is a topic that is of interest to everybody. The bad news is that we are still graduating doctors, in Canada, in the UK, I think in every European country. People are still getting medical licenses to practice medicine without having ever spent a single day in an obesity clinic, without ever having counseled a patient on bariatric surgery, without having any idea of what medications for obesity management are on the market, or ever having had to answer exam questions on some of the things we're going to hear about in Carel's talk when he talks to us about, the science of obesity in terms of how the body regulates its body weight. So that's the bad side. You can still nobody would ever be licensed to practice medicine if they had not, in their medical training, treated someone who has diabetes, or treated someone who has heart disease, or treated someone who has got asthma, or treated some patient with some of the rarest diseases, where I sometimes says, there's more people who study this disease than have it. But you have to do that to get your medical license. But nobody seems to care that we have not just one generation, but that we are continuing to generate clinicians who have absolutely no idea when it comes to obesity. I was quoted once in the Medical Post in Canada for saying that Dr. Sharma says your doctor knows as much about obesity as your cab driver, and that was the headline of the article. And I thought I was going to get a lot of flack from my colleagues there, because this was a paper that was only read by doctors. But actually, a lot of doctors said, no, you know what, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. That
Brilliant.
Often don't assume that your doctor knows more about obesity than you do. In most cases, you probably know way more than they do. And that's unfortunate. We are trying very hard to change that, but it's a long way.
It is, yeah.
And we can talk about some of the reasons why that is, but I'm just going to stop there.
I know, and I'm thinking, as Ben had said there, that he actually, I was here as well, actually. I remember that fantastic day. It was European Obesity Day. We were in the convention centre in Dublin. Arya, you were on stage. You had your elastic band out. And I remember even the penny for me dropping, even though I'd seen it before, going, wow, every time it just hits the nail on the head that our bodies are resisting and resisting and resisting and resisting. And for people like Ben and people like Claire saying, we wish we'd known more. We've a lot of educating to do. We've a lot of sharing of knowledge to do. And we can't, just like we can't completely blame ourselves. Yes, we have a responsibility to our health, to our diet, to what we put into our bodies, to how active we are. But there are aspects of it that are completely out of our control, because obesity is a relapsing disease. So we can't blame ourselves, but we can, oh, go on.
Yeah, I got to catch you there, because it's come up more times. In fact, in fact, we've already heard about bad habits, and we've heard about unhealthy living, and we've heard about all of those lifestyle factors. Now, just think about this differently. If somebody told you that, I've got a lot of bad habits, I can't seem to, I've got these days where I can't seem to get myself out of bed. I'm not interested in anything. My family wants to go out and do fun stuff, and I know I like doing the fun stuff, but I just can't get myself to do this fun stuff anymore. My appetite has kind of gone out the window, even when you put the most appealing food in, my favorite food in front of me. I just can't get myself to eat it, although I know I should be eating it, and I know I should be this thing. So I've got all these bad habits of not really, doing these things. And then I've got all these sad thoughts that keep coming to me, but I know I should be thinking of happy things. I mean, but somehow I persevere around all these sad feelings and sad thoughts, which I know is really unhealthy. And I know I shouldn't be doing that. And I really have no one else to blame other than myself, for not thinking happy thoughts when the sun is shining, the birds are singing, my family is healthy. I don't know why the hell I'm so sad. And I have no one else to blame but myself. Now, if I heard that story from someone, I said, listen, we call this depression, and you better go see your doctor. And in obesity, we've got this whole thing that when you do these things that are actually symptoms of the disease, you kind of end up blaming yourself, not seeing that that's the symptom. This is, and that's why I say, telling someone with obesity to just eat less would be like telling someone with depression, listen, your problem is you're not happy. You need to cheer up. You need to, I don't even know why you're not happy. I mean, look at all those people who have reasons to be unhappy. You don't even have a reason to be unhappy. So, get your act together. That's not how we approach depression, but that's exactly how most of us approach obesity. And I think a lot of people who have obesity themselves approach it themselves. So now we can talk about internalized weight bias, that it's not just that other people are blaming me for my obesity. No, I'm blaming myself for my obesity. And that's when the guilt comes, and then that's when you feel ashamed, and that's when you actually do the opposite of what you should be doing, and that is reaching out for professional help. You say, well, how are they going to help? It's me who's having these sad thoughts, so what's my doctor going to do?
Do you're spot on. You are absolutely spot on, Sally. When I think of that analogy that Arya just came out there with, to me it completely resonates. And I want to get your thoughts on what you heard from Lisebeth. And I know in the obesity world, that isn't the area that you work in. However, you are an absolute legend on hormones and everything to do with it. And probably my favorite person, because I'm hot flushing like crazy and menopausal at the moment, and I don't even have a glass of wine like Arya has. So share your thoughts, lady.
Thank you. Though I said that I don't work with obesity, I definitely do see people which are overweight. And Lisbeth's talk was amazing. It resonated completely with me, or Carol's talk, and absolutely in all ways. There was one thing I missed, which I focus greatly on, and that is actually gut health. Because a lot of these appetite controlling hormones, which are produced in the gut, are very much affected by our gut microbiome. And it's sort of the latest vision of maybe the cause or a cause or part of the cause for obesity or overweight obesity. And I find this area particularly interesting, absolutely. And when I work with my clients, we start with the gut basically and try to see if we can alter. Science is showing that people that have obesity have a very limited diversity of the type of microbiome. They have more of a particular family called the Firmicutes, which get extra more out of the foods that you're eating, this kind of thing. So it really does have a big role, the gut. So I find that very interesting. And all these appetite controlling hormones, they're all modulated as such by the area of the brain which she was talking about, the hypothalamus, which I call the commander-in-chief. But the hypothalamus is the commander-in-chief for the hormone system. So it's being, it's modulating the appetite hormones, but it's then going to look at cortisol, the stress hormone. It's going to look at the thyroid. It's also controlling these. So they're all interconnected. I'd also just like to comment on doctors not knowing about obesity. Well, you talked about hot flushes. I hear from so many of my female clients going to the doctor knows absolutely nothing about menopause. So I don't think it's just obesity. I think that they have an enormous workload, and you have somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes with them, and if you're not prepared and you've got your questions written down, then you don't necessarily get the answers you need. But I feel a very important area is obviously educating the doctors, and that's not the issue as such, but it's educating you that has the weight problem. I as I said, I work with people who are a little bit overweight. I work with people who are not overweight, but it doesn't make any difference. They need to know about the foods that they're eating. And when I ask them, do you know, is there any protein in some chicken? People, there's a big question mark. Protein in chicken? I have no idea. I have no idea what the protein is. People do not know what they're eating. They have no idea if there's carbohydrate there or protein or fat or what kind of fat. Absolutely no idea. And I think that if we educate all of us, about the foods that we're eating and a little bit of how they may be used by the body and how they affect the body, then perhaps some people would change the food which is on their plates.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important message. Like, I think because I'm a patient with obesity, and I know Ben as well would resonate with this, having had treatment and had surgery, I know how much carbohydrates are in everything that I eat and how much protein's in it, because I'm well aware of what my body actually needs after surgery. And I think this is something that we're seeing with patients who have obesity. They're researching more, they're reading up more. It's, as Carel is actually literally about to tell us in this next interview, it's about the health gain. So when we say weight, I often think that we focus too much on weight. We should be talking about the health of somebody who has obesity, because for me, it would be reversing type 2 diabetes. It would be getting an all clear on my cardiovascular scan, to make sure that my heart is happy and healthy. It's, not having pain in my hips. And I know, Ben, you would resonate with that with going out walking so much. It's being able to be active. So I think we have to flip that conversation around. And I know Carel does it really, really well in his upcoming interview. But Sally, I want to thank you, because me and my menopause absolutely love you for what I'm going through, and many other women will. And I'll actually share your details, which is www.sally-walker.com, for people who want to find you, and they'll be able to find you as well on our website. So I'm going to move along. I want to introduce this gentleman. It is, hi Sally. It is Professor Carel Le Roux. He is recognized as a world leader in metabolism and obesity. He is an expert in metabolic medicine and is currently Professor of Experimental Pathology in University of Dublin. Now, he is pretty much the man with his finger on the pulse when it comes to what's the latest on treatments for obesity. And we talked about weight regain. Let's hear what Carel Le Roux had to say. Hello and welcome, Carel Le Roux. It is fantastic to have you here with us. It's been a long time that we've actually wanted to bring you on, and I think this topic is absolutely perfect. So what we've been discussing with our panel, and obviously Lisebeth and our patient community, is weight regain. And as we see now, we're coming to the point that it's more on people's kind of lips now. We're seeing more weight regain, whether it's after pharmacotherapy, after bariatric surgery, and in general, people are just going to the slimming club and stepping away and having weight regain. And first of all, I wanted to get your thoughts around weight regain, because you do a lot of work in this area.
Yeah, so thank you so much for this opportunity. And I think the real important issue here is to understand that obesity is a disease, and we've spoken about that a lot of time, and therefore it should not be surprising to us that if our treatment no longer can control the disease, what then happens is we have a return of the signs of the disease, which is weight. What we see in clinical practice is if somebody engages in a treatment that works, what we will then find is that the disease comes under control. If the disease is under control, what you naturally see is people lose weight. But the minute the patient disengages from the treatment, so they stop the diet or stop the medication or even the operations get reversed, what you then find is that the disease comes back. So I think the way we need to think about weight regain is almost in the same way as we have to think about relapse of the disease. And if we almost rephrase it to relapsing disease, then what we need to do will become quite clear, because all we have to do is gain control of the disease again. Now that can be challenging, but again, with the new pharmacotherapies and the new medications that we have available, these drugs that we now have in our hands, that can make a big difference for people who've had weight regain or relapse of the disease after diet or medication or even surgical treatments.
I love a couple of things that you've said there, and one of them was, and I know we don't often touch on this, is that weight is a symptom of the disease, and we focus always on the number on the scale, and especially when we're regaining weight. I know myself, 15, 16 years after bariatric surgery and having weight regain, and it's that number on the scale I focus on, but it is just one of the symptoms of this disease that needs management, right?
That's right.
So when I think about it, then I think of, pharmacotherapy. It's a big word. And for some people, they say, what on earth is pharmacotherapy? Give us some information.
Yeah, so medications, are called pharmacotherapy, and what they really are medications that treat the disease. And what we now have is at least 3 different medications within Europe that all are effective in their own way. Now, in different parts of the world, there are more medications available than what we have in Europe, but certainly the future is going to be very bright. But what all of the drug companies are doing is they are trying to understand obesity as a disease. And what we are now finding is that the majority of people, the disease sits in the part of the brain that you and I cannot control by thinking. So we cannot think ourselves less hungry or think ourselves more satisfied. But what these medications do is they work in exactly that area and allow us to just become normal. And that's the amazing thing when somebody has had bariatric surgery, because the surgery works in exactly the same parts of the brain, or you have a medication that works really well, is the patients come back and they say, this is amazing, because for the first time in my life, I'm not thinking about food anymore. For the first time in my life, I can just eat normal. I enjoy the food. I eat the same food as I've always eaten, but I just eat less of it and I feel satisfied. And I'm not obsessed, thinking about what am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for dinner? And that is what the medications are doing. It's working in the part of the brain that has the disease. And therefore, by controlling the disease, what you then find is people become normal.
What you've just done there is brilliantly dispelled a myth that, bariatric surgery is just having your stomach stapled so you don't eat as much. And you've brought it out in that it's neurological. So it is that part of the brain that is so challenged. So it's not just, stop eating. It's quite a challenge. It's so unbelievably complex. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And when I listen to Arya and Lisebeth speak about obesity as being complex, and that kind of the bat analogy and the elastic band analogy, and how hard it is, I think as a patient it's quite upsetting. You think that once you get the number on the scale down, that is it, you're cured, and you don't realize then, and I think it's only of the last probably 5-10 years we're hearing more of, you will have to manage this for the rest of your life. So weight regain is quite likely. And it's something that you're going to be challenged with. But pharmacotherapy is actually really making a dent in that. It's giving hope to a lot of the patients. And you've worked with fantastic patients that I know personally, and some tremendous people in the Strive group in Ireland. And what was that? That was a trial. That was, how did patients get on? And what did you see happen throughout with them?
Yeah, and what we are seeing is that even when it comes to the medications, it is not the smart people that listen to us that have a good effect, or the people that don't listen to us and don't do what we ask that don't have an effect. it is biology. And I think that's an important point, because so often people find that if the medications didn't work for them, that they blame themselves and they think that they have done something wrong. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. But what we are finding is that there's a substantial number of people who respond, who feel less hungry, feel more satisfied, and then go on to lose 10, 15, 20% of their body weight. But what we also find is that if we stop the treatment, the disease relapses. And people come back and they say, especially in clinical trials, when we are limited by the sort of number of months that we can provide the treatment for, patients come back and they say, I am ravenous. I am just completely obsessed with food since I've stopped this medication. I had such a good response, and now suddenly, everything is back and worse. And if anything explains to us that this is a disease, it's actually what people experience. Because by stopping the medications, we're not making people less motivated, or we're not making them less intelligent. All we're doing is removing this effect that we have on the brain. So I think we'll find that there's different drugs that work for different people. Unfortunately, we are not smart enough. We don't have a blood test that I can do that will tell me you will respond to drug A and you will respond to drug B. So what we do is we use the medication. If we find that people respond, less hungry, more satisfied, and subsequently lose weight, then we continue. And then people ask us, so how long should I be taking this medication? And the answer is, you need to take the medication until you have decided you want to regain your weight. So the moment you've decided you want to regain your weight, you can stop the medication, because that's what's naturally going to happen. And that is a difficult conversation and a difficult decision to make, because what you were saying, I would completely agree. People are prepared to, do almost anything to lose weight, but it's not always communicated that this is a chronic disease that needs chronic treatment.
And what you said about it being relapsing is so key, because we see in I suppose social media and newspapers and magazines about people who've lost weight and gained weight and regained weight, and we see all of these shows on TV about the biggest loser, but then suddenly they're regaining weight, and people say, oh, they're yo-yo dieting, but it's not. It's that the disease is relapsing, and it needs long-term, lifelong management and treatment. And just before you go, because I know you're incredibly busy, but before you head off, we have had the rollout of, you said, 3 different drugs now in various countries across Europe. I think probably in the States you're a little bit ahead of us there as well. But what is your hopes for Ireland? And, when I think of what you've done with that STRIVE group, with that trial, and as you move forward, what is your hopes as Professor Carel Le Roux?
Well, certainly, firstly, is our hopes that we will need to change the industry standard. We now need to talk about double-digit weight loss. So 10% weight loss and maintenance in the long term is really the minimum requirement. And now we need to think about 15 and 20% weight loss with medication, which I certainly think will be possible. And then secondly, we need to do this in a responsible way. Because we want to treat as many patients as possible, but we need to change the narrative away from weight loss to health gain. And we are now thinking about those diseases that are caused by obesity, which we can reverse by intentional weight loss. So by helping people lose weight, it's not the numbers on the scale that matter. It's actually their functionality, or it is their diabetes, or it is the fact that they can fall pregnant. So changing it completely to health gain rather than weight loss.
I love that, because we always say we want to shift away from talking about weight and talk about health, but the health gain for a woman who has tried everything to, get pregnant, for somebody who, hasn't been able to go out and kick the ball with their child because they've struggled with their hips, their ankles, their legs, lymphedema, to have their type 2 diabetes reversed, that is what it is about. So thank you so much for putting that on the map and bringing it to the conversation. I wish you well in all of your work, and I'm just incredibly grateful on behalf of all of us at ECPO that you've taken the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. I love it. I absolutely love it. I know I've said the word love so many times on this patient lounge, but I want to bring back the panel that I love also, Dr. Arya Sharma, Miss Teena Gates, and of course, Mr. Ben Whelan, who are there in Ireland. Now, everything that I heard from Carel Le Roux, it just resonates. And I think I probably become more empowered as a person when I listen to experts like Carel talking about, you know, treatments and how we can manage obesity, because my grandmother would often say it's probably too late for me because she's in her 80s, but it's not too late for other people. Now, normally I would come to our patient panel first, but I can see like the wheels like turning like a hamster, like running around in Arya's mind there. Arya, do you want to share some thoughts on what Carel talked about?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you know, I think one of the important points that he was making was the fact, and this is what I've often said, is that when we think about treatments for obesity, it's not the people who fail the treatments, it's the treatments that fail the people. Which basically means that, you know, if this treatment, whatever the treatment is, whether it's surgery, whether it's the medication, whether it's whatever the program is that has been prescribed to you by your doctor, if that doesn't work for you, well, that's because that treatment is failing you. It's not you failing the treatment. And that psychologically is really important. I mean, this would be in the same, you know, if you were talking cancer treatment, and if you had a cancer and you got a chemotherapy and your cancer does not respond to the chemotherapy, you would say, well, that's the wrong chemotherapy. You wouldn't be going around blaming your cancer cells or your body. Well, you know, I'm sorry, my body is so bad, it doesn't even respond to chemotherapy, and you'd be beating up on yourself. No, clearly you'd go back to your doctor and say, sorry, doc, that apparently that must have been the wrong treatment. In obesity, we just accept that if the treatment doesn't work, it's our fault. And we don't go back. In fact, we're ashamed to go back because you've said, you know, I went to my doctor and then he got me the bariatric surgery, and, you know, the doctor was, you know, he took all the trouble of operating on me and still it hasn't worked for me. So clearly there's something wrong with me. Yeah, but that's a perfect case where the treatment has failed the patient. It's not the patient failing the treatment. So clearly, I mean, the best you can say there sometimes is, and you know, as a doctor, you don't want to say this too often, but sometimes you just have to be honest. And if you say, well, sorry, well, we've tried everything. Unfortunately, it looks like we don't have the right treatment for your type of obesity. And, you know, that's, well, you know, sometimes we have to tell that to patients with cancer. We tell them, you know, sorry, you know, for the type of cancer that you have, we don't have a good treatment. You know, maybe in a couple of years, I don't know, but that's the sad fact. And we have to accept that for some forms of obesity, we simply do not have a good treatment. But that's not your fault. I mean, that's just because the science hasn't, you know, evolved to the point yet. So I think that's a really important point. He made several points, incidentally, that I just want to point out that are actually part of the new Canadian obesity guidelines. And some of you might have heard of the fact that Canada last year did release a new set of guidelines, very comprehensive. We looked at about 500,000, you know, pieces of literature there, research, and a lot of the things that Carel talked about, you'll actually find in those guidelines, including a new definition for obesity, where we don't define obesity based on body mass index, because body mass index is a measure of size, it's not a measure of health, so you can't use a measure of size to diagnose a disease. That makes no sense. So we've actually changed that, but there's a number of other things that we've really changed. Now, before I go, because I don't know if I get to speak again, I just want to make one point going back to something that Teena actually said when she climbed up to Everest. So I've actually used that line for patients. I said, you know, when we talk about obesity treatment, we're not just talking about climbing to the top of Everest. No, we're talking about climbing to the top of Everest and then staying there. Because that's what you got to do. Because the minute you step, you even think in your mind, okay, it's time to go down the peak again. Well, that's when your weight starts coming back. So climbing Everest is a lot easier than getting a handle on your obesity.
Gosh, yeah. Teena, I just want to give you a big virtual hug.
Yeah.
You know, I think those points are just so poignant, and I think they drill home to our audience. Like I've been watching the good old Facebook and Twitter while we've been on the interview there with Carel, and I noticed that somebody said, I need a hypothalamus transplant, because the commander-in-chief obviously needs to be reprogrammed. Like, I mean, I loved actually Sally's words about that, because it is the commander-in-chief, and people don't realize just how we are challenged, and we don't have a choice per se, you know, and we do need treatment, we do need management, as Carel said. There's a lot of fantastic supportive comments. Arya, of course, you are adorned. If they could throw roses at you, they probably would, from the Twitter at the moment. But I just want to come to Ben and Teena and kind of give you guys the last words before we wrap up. I think for me, as a patient, and you guys are strong, passionate patient advocates, when I listen to Carel Le Roux, when I listen to Arya, I feel hopeful. I feel inspired. Ben, how does it feel for you knowing that there is treatment coming in double digits on the scales, double digits, 10 to 15% weight loss?
Yeah, sign me up for that one, please. Yeah. I like people have generally said about doctors, and as Arya said, well, they don't know anything yet, or everything yet, I should say. I always think of the old adage, if you want to know my life, walk a day in my shoes. And then people who say it's easy to lose weight obviously never had to do it.
This is it, isn't it? Yeah. And I think that ties in well with when we say, you know, when Lisebeth was saying about, you know, the person who's 80 kilos and the person who was 130 kilos, and how much they struggle to get that weight down. Whereas the other person was saying, hey, it's no problem, I'm staying here, I haven't gone up and down the scale, you know. And walking in somebody else's shoes is a really, really huge experience. And I think when I look at my bookshelf and I see Teena Gates' book over there and the picture of you on the front, I think through this lounge, and probably from some of your sharings, Teena, people have walked in your shoes. How do you feel?
Well, you actually mentioned in passing that it's quite depressing to hear how this is a recurring and relapsable condition. And I have to say that, you know, being a part of the Patient Lounge, you know, it's challenging, because you're sort of thinking, well, my God, you know, I'm in my mid-50s, I've got my dad's 96, you know, there's 30 or 40 years ahead of me. And I'm quite scared and worried and determined, but very confused, I suppose, about thinking about the decades that are to come ahead of me. And I'm certainly not happy with my body the way it is at the moment, and not for any, you know, it's not the green dress in the back of the wardrobe that concerns me. It's, I want to be able to kayak, I want to be able to get my bike out, I want to be able to have a hip operation, you know, that's not going to happen the way that I am at the moment. So there's so many things that I want to live, you know. And I want to be active, and I want to be physical and powerful and strong, and I want all those things. And against me is this crushing battle. But I have to say, Arya, you know, not too keen about the fact that I'd have to live on Mount Everest for the rest of my life. But I have to say, your analogy over about depression, I had a wow moment, you know, when you said we don't tell sad people to just go away and be happy, and, you know, that it's their fault. And that really sort of resonated with me. And you know, so many of your messages are really about anti-patient shaming, and that's new territory for me, because I've lived my entire life blaming myself, and you know, feeling really, really annoyed at myself when I come up short after all the energy and hard work that I've done, and you know, the willpower that was involved in losing that initial 10 stone, and then the desperation of just seeing it all slip away. And I've been, you know, undermining, you know, mentally, I've been undermining that by beating myself up. So, you know, thank you so much. You've been like a glass of cold water, you know, very refreshing, and, you know, and it's filled me with hope. And Carl's comments about, you know, the neurological factors of obesity, that's giving me hope. And, you know, and talking about the opportunity to be normal, that really has registered with me, because I don't feel normal, and I have not felt normal for so many decades. And I would love to be able to walk into a room or even wake up in the morning without having a negative and you know, compulsive thought about what I'm going to eat today, and what's going to be, you know, in my diary for to the end of the day of what I've eaten during the day. I mean, how abnormal is that? I mean, the thought that there are people out there who wake up and think about what they're going to wear, weather, whether it's raining, whether it's sunshine, and I wake up and I think about what's in my fridge, what am I going to eat, or more importantly, what am I not going to eat today? So I would like to be normal. I would like to be powerful and strong and fit, and I'm not giving up just yet.
And I think that is a perfect way to end, but we'll give it to Arya Sharma. Come on.
Well, I've got to, Vicki, when you started this, you said you're going to have 1 million people watching this on social media, and I hope you do. But I've got to say one thing. I mean, we've been talking about how things are not the way we want them to be, and ultimately, I've got to say, if you want things to change, it's on you. Because if you think of this, one of the things that obesity has going for it is it affects millions and millions, and actually, in fact, billions of people. So in any given country right now, there's about 1/4 of the population, so about 20 to 25%. In some countries, it's almost 1/3 of the population that's living with obesity. If everybody living with obesity said, I'm not going to elect any politician who does not make it part of his political program is to provide the best possible care to people living with obesity, you simply don't elect them. You're going to have every politician in the country scrambling to get your vote. But that's not going to happen until people living with obesity like yourselves and like the people watching this actually stand up and say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of being treated of blaming myself and feeling guilty and feeling ashamed and being treated like a second-class citizen. I pay my taxes, I pay for my health insurance, I've got my employer, I try to work. Why do I not get the treatments that I know are out there? And these treatments are out there, and we've heard about this. So I'm sorry about this, but it's back on you. Don't expect the doctors to go around changing access to care. It's going to be patients and their families and their friends and their colleagues and their neighbors and their employers demanding that you have access to the treatments that we know are out there.
Do you know what? You said that brilliantly, and I love it because, and I know I said love about a gazillion times in this session, because one thing we're doing in ECPO is IPAP training. It's interactive patient advocacy program, and it is all about advocating and challenging and changing and driving what we want and what we need for people just like ourselves who have obesity. So Arya, now that you're in Germany, now that you're in Europe, and we will take you as part of leading that charge with us. You can hold our hands on the way through. And I just want to thank, I know this has resonated so well with Teena and Ben and Sally, who has left us, but thank you so much, everybody. We literally have no more time. We're out of minutes. We will endeavour to answer all of your questions on social media. It's kind of busy over there at the moment with our comms team. So until our next episode, stay safe and well, and have a wonderful evening, everybody. Adios.